The air inside the power conduit tunnel hummed with static charge, thick with the scent of ozone and rust. Malik Kofi Dawes crouched under a flickering maintenance panel, hands deep in the tangled wiring of an aging plasma regulator. Sparks jumped at his fingertips, but his mind wasn't on the cables. It was on the silence pressing in from behind, the silence of the Nari. They didn't speak here, not unless spoken to, not unless ordered. Malik had been briefed like everyone else. Nari workers were efficient, non-violent, and obedient. But they were never to be engaged, never to be trusted. Don't smile at them. Don't linger. Don't take off your helmet, the protocols repeated. Sterile. Cold. Necessary, they claimed, for biocultural stability on Cora 3. Still, he glanced over his shoulder. She was there again. The same Nari girl from 2 rotations ago. Small, barely shoulder height. Her skin shimmered with a faint silver tone that caught the corridor's pale lights. Her eyes, strangely large, with deep violet irises, watched him without blinking. She wasn't working. Just watching. Malik adjusted his visor and looked back at the console, trying to ignore the weight of her gaze. He had repairs to finish. A backup converter had blown in the last dust storm. If he didn't reroute the grid, whole sections of the sector would go dark. A faint sound broke the silence. He turned again quickly. She was smiling, not broadly, just a soft curl of her lips, fragile, tentative. But unmistakably warm. It wasn't mockery or fear. It was something else, something disarmingly human. And then a sharp crack echoed down the corridor. One of the guards had seen it. The girl's expression vanished as she flinched, arms wrapping around her chest. Malik rose instinctively. "Hey, what the hell was that for?" he barked. The armored soldier didn't answer, just lowered his shock rod and stared at Malik through a blackened visor. "She broke protocol," the man said flatly. "Nari don't smile at humans. It causes confusion." Malik took a step forward, fists clenched. His heart thudded loud in his helmet. Confusion? She wasn't even talking. She engaged emotionally. That's contamination. Contamination, like she was mold or rot. The girl hadn't cried out. She hadn't moved. She just stood, still and small, eyes now lowered. No expression. Malik's mouth was dry. "She's not a machine," he said. The guard didn't reply. As Malik turned back to his panel, the silence returned, but now it pressed heavier like the weight of a collapsed ceiling. The girl had smiled at him, not out of need, not to manipulate, but to connect. And they had hurt her for it. Before we go deeper into this journey of connection and defiance, make sure to subscribe to our channel for powerful human stories in distant galaxies. He finished the repair, hands trembling slightly as he sealed the panel. But as he passed by her on the way out, something in him shifted. He slowed, met her eyes. And though his visor hid his face, though the rules screamed against it, he let himself smile back. Just a little, just enough. She didn't smile again, but her eyes flickered with something. Recognition, maybe. Gratitude, or the fear of what might come next. Malik didn't know what he'd just done, but he knew it wasn't over. Not for him. Not for her. Not by a long shot. The corridor lights dimmed slightly as the day cycle entered dusk. Inside the decontamination unit, Malik stripped off his protective gloves with quick, stiff movements. His helmet, still locked to the filtration seal, hissed faintly as the pressure equalized. He didn't lift it. Not yet. His mind was still caught in that moment, that smile. The guard's voice repeating like static. Contamination. He sat on the bench, exhaling slowly. The visor reflected his own face back at him. Tired eyes, a short beard lined clean along his jaw, and a heaviness in his expression he hadn't carried that morning. The decon chamber was empty except for him. That was a small grace. There were rules for helmet removal near Nari zones, and if he disobeyed them, he could be reassigned or worse. Still, he needed air. He unlatched the helmet and lifted it off. The recycled scent of his own breath gave way to the sterile tang of purified oxygen. He closed his eyes and rubbed the sweat from his brow. Behind the heavy steel wall, he could still feel the girl's presence. Her smile had been soft, hesitant, almost like she was asking a question, and he had no answer, only silence, and now guilt. The door behind him hissed. A fellow engineer, Devontae, stepped in, unbothered. "Yo, Malik, you still here?" Malik stood quickly, helmet in hand. "Yeah, finishing repairs." Devontae raised an eyebrow. "You good?" Malik hesitated. "Just thinking." "About?" "Nothing." But Devontae studied him a second longer, then shrugged. "You hear about the strike on Sector 7? Nari shut down the processors, like straight-up refused orders." Malik's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "They say one of them was punished for singing, bro, like a melody. Can you believe that?" Whole squad went mute after that. Just stood there. Malik felt something in his chest tighten. And what happened? "They brought in those enforcement bots. You know how that ends." He did. Everyone did. Later, after Devontae left, Malik walked the outer perimeter alone. The artificial twilight cast long shadows on the aluminum walkways, the surface of Cora 3 glowing faintly under twin moons. In the distance, the Nari quarters loomed, segregated modules stacked like crates, colorless and silent. He reached the overlook near the work zone. Just below, the girl sat by herself. Not working, just sitting. Shoulders curled inward, arms crossed loosely over her chest. He knew he shouldn't approach. He knew every protocol warned against proximity, empathy, or acknowledgement. But his feet didn't listen. He climbed down the maintenance ladder, slow and deliberate. She didn't move when he came closer. She watched him again, eyes wide but unreadable now. No smile, just breath. He stopped a few meters away and lowered his helmet to his side. "I don't know your name," he said, voice soft. "They don't tell us. You're just units, numbers, faces." She tilted her head slightly. "I'm Malik," he said, stepping closer. "I'm not supposed to be here." She didn't answer. "They said you contaminated me, because you smiled. That's ridiculous, right?" Still silence, but not absence. She was listening. Malik inhaled slowly. The air here smelled different, cleaner somehow, almost metallic, but with something earthy beneath it. He wondered if her people noticed things humans couldn't. Maybe that was why she smiled. He lowered himself to the ground, sitting cross-legged. His helmet rested on his knees. "I took this off," he said quietly. "That's a violation." Her gaze flicked to the helmet. "Because I needed to feel real," he added. "Not filtered, not sealed off. You made me remember that." The moment stretched between them, heavy and strange. Then, barely, a flicker. Her fingers moved. Just a twitch, but it was deliberate. She pointed at the helmet, and then touched her own chest. Malik didn't understand. Not yet. But something had been exchanged. Something unspoken, like a seed dropped into dry soil. Behind them, somewhere far away, a sensor clicked on. Surveillance had begun. The Dawes family quarters in the new Senegalese enclave were quiet when Malik arrived. The compound sat at the edge of the upper residential dome, surrounded by synthetic baobab trees and murals of Earth's West African coastlines, a replica of what once was. Inside, the air smelled like jasmine oil and slow-cooked spices. Home. But tonight, it didn't feel like refuge. Captain Okoro Dawes was waiting for him. Seated at the low table in full colonial security armor, Okoro looked every inch the soldier he was known to be, imposing, proud, jaw clenched with years of discipline. His helmet rested beside a bowl of untouched stew. "You took your helmet off," he said before Malik could speak. Malik closed the door behind him, dropping his satchel to the floor. "They sent you the report already?" "I'm your commanding officer. Of course they did." "It wasn't like that." Okoro didn't blink. "Then explain it to me. Because from what I read, you violated Protocol 6C, approached a restricted worker, and sat within 3 meters of her. Tell me I'm missing something." Malik hesitated. She smiled at me. They struck her for it. "I couldn't just walk away. She's Nari, Malik. They're not our responsibility. She's a person." Okoro stood up slowly. The light from the window framed his silhouette, broad shoulders, flawless posture. Malik had grown up trying to stand like that. Now, all he felt was pressure behind his ribs. "You're letting your emotions compromise judgment," Okoro said. "There are rules for a reason." "No," Malik snapped. "There are systems designed to keep us comfortable while they suffer in silence. You enforce those systems." "I protect this colony," Okoro replied, voice tight. "You think the council gave us this land out of mercy? You think integration was ever real? We survived because we kept order." "Order doesn't mean justice." Okoro's jaw flexed. For a moment, neither spoke. The walls seemed to close in around them, heavy with unspoken memories. "You always do this," Malik said, voice quieter now. "You always follow orders, even when they tear people apart, even when they tore us apart." Something shifted in Okoro's expression, barely perceptible but real. "You still holding on to that? You made me choose between engineering school and helping Mum during the food rations. You told her I wasn't ready to lead. You've never seen me as anything but a liability. You were emotional, reckless." "I was 15, Malik said, "and I cared." Okoro stepped forward, inches from his brother now. "You think this is about you caring? You think I don't care? I lost people during the revolt on Station 12. I've buried Nari children, because our people broke the rules and then watched others pay the price. I'm not trying to start a war, Okoro. No, you're just opening doors you can't close." Malik met his brother's stare. "Then maybe they were never supposed to be closed." For a long moment, the silence between them stretched. The air was thick with unresolved years. Finally, Okoro stepped back and turned toward the window. His voice dropped. "I won't report it this time, but don't mistake my silence for support. You do this again, I won't protect you." "I don't need your protection." "Yes, you do," Okoro said almost gently. "Because what you're doing, that's not a small act. That's a step into something much bigger. And you don't even see the edge yet." Malik left without another word, but his hands were shaking, not from fear, from the weight of knowing he'd crossed a line, and that he would cross it again. The alarm klaxons tore through the still air like blades. Malik had just finished calibrating a cooling array when the red strobe lights flared across the horizon. He turned toward the lowlands, Sector 12's edge, where smoke now bled into the pale orange sky. The turbines of the atmospheric scrubbers roared louder than usual, almost like they were gasping. "Revolt at the Nari work farm," came the automated broadcast, sterile and mechanical. "Non-compliant behavior detected. Enforcement units en route." Malik froze. The word revolt struck deep. He dropped his toolkit and ran. The transport tunnels had emergency locks, but Malik's clearance as an engineer let him override the doors. He passed empty checkpoints, his boots slamming metal grates, breath tightening in his chest. Every shadow seemed to flicker with urgency. By the time he reached the hill overlooking the site, the rebellion was already unraveling. It wasn't a war zone. There were no weapons, no screams, just rows of Nari workers standing completely still, arms raised to the sky, refusing to move. The guards, 4 of them in full body armor, had surrounded the group. They barked commands, voices sharp through intercoms. Drones buzzed above, their lenses trained on every motion. Malik's eyes scanned the crowd. There, near the back, Ameri. She stood with her shoulders tight, hands raised just like the others. But her head was turned, watching a younger Nari boy being dragged by 2 guards toward the perimeter gate. He wasn't resisting, just stumbling, his face swollen, one leg dragging behind the other. "What did he do?" Malik asked as he approached the nearest guard. "Incited disobedience," the man replied without looking at him. "He sang, that's all, that's not a threat." The guard turned. "They sang in unison, that's not a song, that's a signal." Malik stepped closer. "He's a child." "Doesn't matter. They were told. No expressions, no synchronization, no collective behaviors. It's protocol. They're not machines, they're not human." Malik felt something twist inside him. Ameri's gaze met his from across the field. Her eyes weren't pleading, they were steady, watching what he would do next, and he couldn't walk away. He pushed past the guard and jogged toward the boy. "Let me take him." The guards blocked his path. "Back off, Dawes." I'm qualified for medical override. Section 5A. You're an engineer, not a physician. I've got training. And if you drag him like that, he might never walk again. There was a pause. One of the guards checked his wrist console. The other stared Malik down. You touch him, you're responsible. You take him in, he's yours. Fine. They dropped the boy at his feet. Malik caught him, steadying his limp weight. The boy's skin was cooler than expected, and he whispered something Malik couldn't understand. Words in Nari tongue, trembling like leaves. Malik carried him toward the service shuttle, feeling every eye on him. From the edge of the field, Amiri took a single step forward. Just one. Her fingers curled at her side, subtle like she was holding back a storm. The guards didn't notice, but Malik did. He turned his head slightly, and for the briefest moment they looked at each other like equals, both caught in a system they no longer believed in. He laid the boy on the shuttle's cot and activated the bio panel. Scans buzzed over bruised tissue, oxygen levels, muscle integrity. He didn't know the boy's name, but he knew the cost of being seen. Outside, the guards began breaking up the formation. Batons ready, orders sharp. And Amiri disappeared into the crowd. Malik sat beside the boy, hands still shaking. He didn't stop them, but something told him he would next time. The medbay lights hummed overhead, soft and sterile. Malik sat by the cot, watching the Nari boy's chest rise and fall in slow mechanical rhythm. The biopanel showed signs of stabilization, oxygen flow, neural feedback, circulatory alignment, but the bruises across his ribs were deep, too deep for a child. Malik's fists clenched in his lap. He'd filed a Level 2 medical report. It would be ignored, just like all the others. Behind him, the door hissed open, footsteps light and cautious. He turned. Amiri stood in the threshold, hands folded in front of her, eyes locked on the boy. She hadn't been allowed inside. No clearance. But she came anyway. Malik rose to his feet, unsure whether to speak. The last time they'd shared a space, it had been nothing but glances and silence. But now? She moved closer slowly and knelt beside the cot. One hand hovered above the boy's, then stopped. Not touching, just holding space. "He is my brother," she said. Malik blinked. Her voice was quiet, but clear. Her accent curled around each word like it was precious, foreign, but soft. "His name is Noma," she continued. "He does not speak. He sings, because it's how we remember." Malik swallowed hard. "They said it was a signal." "It is. A memory. From our mother." Before they took her. The air thickened. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, crowded with pain. "I didn't know," Malik said. "You couldn't. They don't teach your kind to hear us." She looked up then, eyes steady and wide. "But you listened anyway." He couldn't hold her gaze. "I didn't mean to make things worse for you," he said. Amiri shook her head. "You didn't. They hurt you. That day when you smiled," her mouth twitched, not quite a frown, not quite anything. "They did, not because I smiled, because I smiled at a human." Malik sat down on the bench beside the cot. "I'm sorry." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because I let them, because I walked away." A pause stretched between them, long enough for the machines to beep again. Amiri broke the silence. "You are different. But not because of your skin." He looked at her sharply. "You are human," she said, "but you carry weight like we do. You feel it here." She touched her chest, just above her heart. "We are not allowed to show that, but we feel it." Malik breathed in, slow. The smell of antiseptic lingered, sharp and cold. But under it, maybe imagined, was the faintest trace of something sweeter, earthier, like wild fruit. "I don't know what to do next," he admitted. "Everything I've been told, it's breaking apart." "Good," she said softly. That one word held more truth than any lesson he'd received in school. "I want to understand," he said. "Your people, you." Amiri's lips parted, uncertain. "That is dangerous." "I don't care." "You should. He met her eyes again. "I won't stop," he said. She nodded once, slowly. Then she stood and turned to leave. But just before the door opened, she paused. Without looking back, she whispered, "We sing our names into each other's breath. It is how we know who we are." Then she stepped into the hall, disappearing once more into the quiet beyond the sterile walls. Malik stayed where he was, staring at the door. The silence didn't feel so empty anymore. It felt like something waiting to be understood. Malik adjusted the collar of his tunic as he entered the civic archives. The building was older than most in the new Senegalese enclave, carved from dark basalt with gold script etched into its beams, a blend of African aesthetic and post-settlement architecture. Here, tradition wasn't just preserved. It breathed. Inside, the temperature dropped. The walls were lined with hollow scrolls, old earth books digitized and annotated in dozens of languages. It smelled of dust, ink, and memory. He found Dr. Zula Monroe seated beneath a wall-sized display of diaspora migration patterns, thick curls piled atop her head, draped in a patterned shawl that shimmered with coded fiber. She looked up as he approached. "You're late," she said, smiling faintly. "I didn't think you'd say yes." "I didn't. I'm saying maybe. Now sit down before I change my mind." Malik sat across from her, the table between them humming with active data fields. Zula leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp. "Tell me what you saw." Malik exhaled. "A girl, Nari, smiled at me. They punished her for it. She survived? Yes, but it changed something." Zula nodded slowly. "It's always small things, not revolutions, moments. That's where it begins." He hesitated. "They don't want us to see the Nari as people." "No," she agreed. "Because if you see them, you'll remember we've been here before. You'll remember what Earth did to our ancestors." The air between them thickened. Zula tapped the console. A projection appeared, archival footage of Earth's Atlantic coast, then plantation records, then coded anti-literacy laws. They feared us for reading, singing, loving openly. Every gesture of joy was seen as resistance. Malik watched the footage, heat building behind his eyes. "They say it's for safety," he said. "They always do." He turned toward her. "What am I supposed to do?" Zula leaned back. "Learn. Ask. Listen. Let their world change yours. Let it hurt. Then decide what you'll carry." Malik looked down at his hands. "I thought I knew who I was. I thought my pride came from surviving." "No," Zula said gently. "Our pride comes from creating. From singing names into silence. From choosing joy even when we're told it's forbidden." He thought of Mary's voice, soft but unshaken. "Do you know much about them?" he asked. "Enough to know they are not so different. Their songs encode memory. Their touch is sacred. Their emotions are layered like rhythms. What we call harmony, they call identity." Malik leaned in. "She told me her people sing their names into each other's breath, that it's how they know themselves." Zula smiled. "You've already begun to hear." The console shifted to display Nari symbols, curling and layered. Zula traced one with her finger. "This means belonging through recognition. It's not ownership, it's presence. Seeing someone so completely that they exist more fully," Malik whispered. "That's what it felt like." Zula nodded. "But don't romanticize it. Their culture is old, complex, and deeply wounded. I don't want to consume it. I want to understand." "Then be prepared to be uncomfortable. Growth always demands a death." Malik looked at her, confused. "The death of who you thought you were," she clarified. Outside, the light dimmed as the dome shifted into night cycle. The archives grew quieter. "Will you teach me?" he asked. "I'll guide you," she said, "but Mary will teach you." He stood, bowing his head in quiet gratitude. "Thank you." Zula smiled, warm and proud. "Go back. Let her see you're still listening." As Malik walked into the night, stars shimmering above the translucent dome, he realized his steps were no longer his alone. He was walking towards someone else's world, carrying his own. The message came at dawn. Malik's wrist console pulsed once, the faint blue glow cutting through the quiet of his quarters. He didn't need to open it to know what it said. Orders never arrived early unless they were meant to hurt. He activated the holo display anyway. Transfer notice. Engineer 2nd Class Malik Kofi Dawes, reassigned to Atmospheric Division, Northern Outpost 12, effective immediately. Clearance suspended for Nari work sectors. He read it twice, jaw tight. The words felt sterile, precise, and yet somehow personal. They weren't just moving him. They were removing him, cutting the thread. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the old wooden carving his mother had given him before she passed. A Sankofa bird, wings curved backward, clutching an egg. Go back and fetch it. The past always calling him home. Now he was being sent away from it. When he reached the transport terminal, the air was cold with the metallic scent of ion engines warming up. Soldiers moved in disciplined lines, their armor gleaming under the dome's filtered sunlight. Everything about the scene screamed control. Containment. He caught sight of Ameri near the barrier. She wasn't supposed to be there, but she stood still, her gaze fixed on him as if her presence alone could stop the departure. Malik hesitated mid-step, uncertain if he should approach. The guards nearby didn't notice her yet. He moved closer, slow enough to avoid attention. She said nothing, only looked at him. Her eyes reflected the morning light like polished amethyst. He opened his mouth to speak, but words failed. Finally, she broke the silence. "They are taking you away," he nodded. "Orders from the council." "Because of me?" "No." He hesitated. "Because I saw you." Something flickered in her expression, guilt or sorrow, he couldn't tell. She lowered her gaze, then reached for the ground. Her fingers brushed through the fine dust until she found a small shard of metal, probably scrap from the loading dock. Using the edge of her nail, she carved a small spiral into the dust beside his boots. The symbol was simple, yet fluid, curling inward, then outward again. "What does it mean?" he asked quietly. She met his eyes. "Return." Malik knelt beside her, his shadow stretching long between them. "I don't know if I can." "You can," she said softly. "You already broke the first law." "You looked at me." A guard shouted something from the platform, calling his name. Malik stood reluctantly. "I'll come back," he promised. Somehow. Ameri's fingers lingered over the spiral. Then she drew another mark beneath it, a small line that crossed the curve like a scar. "For remembering," she said. Before he could answer, the sound of boots approached. He stepped back quickly, lifting his bag. The guard gave him a brief nod, checking his clearance code. "Outpost 12 shuttle leaves in 2 minutes." Malik turned one last time. Ameri was already gone. Only the spiral and its crossing line remained on the dust, glowing faintly under the dome light before the wind scattered it. As the shuttle doors closed around him, the engines vibrated beneath his feet. He looked out through the small window as the enclave shrank in the distance. The vast expanse of Cora 3 spread before him, barren, quiet, unyielding. He pressed his hand to the glass. Maybe she was right. Maybe seeing had already changed everything. But as the horizon swallowed the enclave, Malik realized that understanding came with a price, and he had just begun to pay it. Outpost 12 was a skeleton of steel and silence. The air was thinner here, colder, tinged with the faint burn of ozone from the atmosphere generators. Malik adjusted the collar of his new uniform, the insignia on his chest heavier than it should have been. He wasn't supposed to think. He was supposed to maintain the turbines, monitor data, and keep his mouth shut. But silence had begun to feel like suffocation. At night, when the rest of the engineers returned to their quarters, Malik stayed by the maintenance bay's viewport. The stars over Cora 3 burned brighter here, untouched, indifferent. They reminded him of Ameri's eyes, her symbol, that single word she'd drawn into dust. Return. He whispered it sometimes like a promise. One evening, a coded ping flickered across his wrist console, an encrypted channel unsigned. He frowned, tapping the signal. The text that appeared was short and simple. You've been noticed. Sector 12, Sublevel 3 After Shift. He almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity had already become rebellion. When the night cycle dimmed, Malik made his way down through the maintenance tunnels, following the metallic echoes of his own footsteps. The air grew warmer, carrying the faint scent of burned circuitry and spices. Then, a low hum of voices. He stepped through a half-open hatch and froze. Dr. Zula Monroe stood there, surrounded by a small group of humans and Nari, all seated in a circle. No armor, no rank, no separation. Just people. "Welcome back, Malik," she said, her tone both knowing and kind. This is a study group," she interrupted smoothly. "That's what we call it anyway." He looked around. A Nari man with pale webbed fingers nodded in greeting. A human woman passed Malik a warm metal cup of fermented root tea. "This isn't sanctioned," he said quietly. Zula smiled. "Neither was survival. Sit down." Malik sat. The warmth of the cup steadied his shaking hands. "We share knowledge here," Zula continued. "Music, history, strategies." "You're not the first to ask questions." Malik met the Nari man's eyes. "What do you call yourselves?" the man answered in a low, resonant voice. "The Bridge." A murmur of agreement followed, soft but filled with purpose. Malik frowned. "And what exactly are you trying to build?" "A future," Zula said, "one that doesn't require permission." The Nari man leaned forward. "We resist not with weapons but with memory, with connection. When we share songs, we remind the system we are more than workers." A woman beside him added, "We teach humans their own forgotten rhythms. We remind them of the ancestors who refused to bow." Malik listened, pulse quickening. It felt like being in church back on Earth, where faith had the texture of fire and sorrow. Zula turned to him. "You already began your training the day you took off your helmet." He looked down, embarrassed. "I wasn't trying to rebel. I just wanted to see her." "Exactly," Zula said. "Rebellion always begins with seeing." They began to hum, low, rhythmic, layered. It wasn't a Nari song exactly, nor human, something in between. Malik felt it rise through the floor, through his bones. For a moment, he wasn't in a sterile outpost. He was standing under open sky, both species breathing the same rhythm. When it ended, Zula's voice softened. "You'll need to decide how far you're willing to go, Malik. Learning is one thing, acting is another." "I'm not afraid," he said. "Then listen closely. The next step isn't taught, it's lived." She pressed a small data chip into his palm. "Music file. Hidden in the noise. Study it." As Malik left the sub-level, the melody still vibrated in his chest. It wasn't rebellion yet, but it was the beginning of belonging. The first raid came 3 nights later. Malik was recalibrating the northern turbines when the emergency sirens began to pulse. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate. Not a malfunction alarm. A lockdown. He froze mid-motion, the wrench slipping from his hand. Then the voice echoed through the station's intercom, cold and precise. "All personnel, unauthorized gatherings detected in sub-level 3, containment units deployed, maintain positions." Sub-level 3, the bridge. His blood went cold. He sprinted through the narrow corridors, boots clanging against metal. Every light flickered red, casting jagged shadows along the walls. The distant rumble of drones grew louder, their turbines whining like hornets. By the time he reached the sub-level access hatch, smoke drifted through the vents. Ion gas. He coughed, covering his mouth with his sleeve. The door was locked. Override codes scrambled. "Damn it," he muttered. A hand gripped his shoulder. He turned sharply and found Dr. Zula, eyes red from the fumes. "They're taking people," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Nari and humans alike. They traced our signals." "Where's Amiri?" "She wasn't here tonight," Zula answered, chest heaving. "She went back to the Enclave, but Malik, listen, this isn't a random sweep. They're targeting the ones who shared music." "What?" "The song we practiced. It carried a frequency trace. They must have picked it up through the atmospheric sensors." Malik's stomach sank. "That was my fault. The data chip..." Zula shook her head fiercely. No, don't claim guilt they built for you. Footsteps thundered above them. Security forces. Malik looked toward the shadows where flickering lights revealed 2 drones descending. Go, Zula said. They'll kill the signalers first. I'm not leaving you. You will if you want this to mean anything. He hesitated, torn between fury and fear. The drones hovered closer, their beams slicing through the haze. Zula shoved a small object into his hand, a thin silver ring with embedded circuits. Data key, she said. It holds the contacts. Everyone's still free. Take it and run. Where? To her, the Nari girl. She'll know what to do. Before he could answer, the drones fired a pulse of light. Zula pushed him aside, the shockwave sending him sprawling. His ears rang. When he looked up again, she was gone, smoke and static filling the space where she'd stood. Malik crawled through the maintenance shaft, every breath ragged. The metal vibrated with the tremor of explosions. Somewhere behind him, voices shouted orders. By the time he emerged outside, the sky above the outpost burned with blue light from the containment field. Dozens of figures were being led into transports, some Nari, some human, shackled, heads bowed. Among them, Malik recognized Devonte. His friend's eyes met his for a fleeting second. No blame, no anger, just a quiet acknowledgement of what they'd chosen. Malik turned away. He couldn't afford to be caught. Not yet. He ran across the frozen terrain, the wind sharp against his face. His lungs ached, but he didn't stop. The ring in his hand glowed faintly, the embedded circuits pulsing with each heartbeat. He didn't know how far the network reached, or if anyone was even left to answer its signal, but he knew one thing with unbearable clarity. Zula's words burned into his memory. You will if you want this to mean anything. He reached the edge of the communications ridge and collapsed to his knees, staring at the distant lights of the Enclave. Somewhere beyond that horizon, Amiri was alive. He closed his fist around the ring. They're not taking her, he whispered. Behind him, the wind howled across the steel plains like a dirge, carrying the faint echo of a song once sung in secret. And this time, it sounded like a warning. The walls of the detention complex pulsed with low blue light, each hum synchronized with Malik's heartbeat. His wrists burned where the energy cuffs pressed into skin, small arcs of static jumping whenever he moved too much. He had been here 2 days, maybe 3. The hours blurred together, marked only by the echo of footsteps and the metallic tang of recycled air. When the door finally opened, he didn't look up at first. The boots that entered were too familiar. Malik, a deep voice said, clipped but strained. He lifted his head. Captain Okoro Dawes stood there, helmet tucked under his arm, expression unreadable. Didn't think they'd send you, Malik muttered. I volunteered. Malik laughed bitterly. To deliver the punishment yourself? Don't start. Okoro motioned to the guard at the door, who hesitated, then stepped out. Once they were alone, the captain exhaled and leaned against the wall. You shouldn't have come back here. You were reassigned for a reason. They raided Zula's group. Took them like criminals. I couldn't do nothing. Okoro's jaw tightened. You joined a resistance network. You hid Nari contacts. You crossed every line the council drew. Lines drawn to keep us blind. Malik's voice was low but sharp. She was teaching truth. Okoro's eyes flickered, something between anger and regret. Dr. Monroe is dead. The words hit harder than any blow. Malik went still, breath catching in his throat. No. She refused to surrender data. The drones neutralized her. Malik leaned forward, his voice breaking. She died because of us, because I... Stop. Okoro's tone softened. Because she chose to fight. Don't dishonor her by drowning in guilt. Malik stared at the floor. You talk like you knew her. I did, Okoro admitted quietly. Back when she worked for the Civic Council, before she saw what we were becoming. Malik looked up. Then you know she was right. That doesn't mean I can follow her path. Why not? Because someone has to keep order while you burn bridges. Malik's hands clenched, the cuff sparking faintly. Order built on silence isn't peace. It's obedience dressed up as mercy. Okoro took a slow breath. You always were the idealist. I used to envy that. And now? Now I'm just trying to keep my brother alive. Malik studied him. You still can. Let me go. I can't. You want to. Okoro didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into his armor, pulling out a small black key disc. This conversation never happened. What are you doing? Malik asked, voice cautious. Releasing you, Okoro said. One last time. Malik's throat tightened. If they find out, they will, eventually. But I'll tell them you escaped during transport. After that, I won't be able to protect you again. You don't have to. Okoro stepped closer, meeting his eyes. Listen to me. Whatever you think you're building with them, it'll end in blood if you're not careful. Maybe blood is the only thing that changes anything. No. Okoro's voice cracked slightly. It's not. I've seen that story. It ends the same every time. Our bodies in their systems, our names rewritten. For a moment, both men stood in silence, the hum of the cell filling the space between them. Finally, Malik said softly, You always said duty mattered more than love. I was wrong. Okoro pressed the disc into the lock. The cuffs released with a faint hiss. Malik rubbed his wrists, eyes burning. Go, Okoro whispered, and don't come back. Malik hesitated at the door. You could still choose different. I just did. Their eyes met, brother to brother, soldier to rebel, before Malik stepped into the corridor and vanished into the blue light. The desert between the human enclave and Nari territory stretched like an endless wound, flat, red, and humming with static energy from the planet's magnetic storms. Malik's boots sank into the dust, each step crunching against silence. He'd been walking for hours, guided only by the faint signal pulsing from Zula's ring. Every few minutes the wind shifted, carrying whispers of charged particles that shimmered like glass in the distance. His breath rasped inside the rebreather mask, the taste of copper heavy on his tongue. He hadn't slept since escaping the detention complex. He replayed Okoro's words in his mind. I just did. His brother's voice lingered like an ache, half warning, half farewell. The ridge ahead glowed faintly with bioluminescent moss, marking the invisible boundary. Beyond it lay Nari land, unmonitored, forbidden. Malik hesitated. Crossing meant exile. Crossing meant no return. But behind him, there was nothing left to return to. He adjusted the pack on his shoulder and stepped over. Almost instantly, the air changed. The static hum softened. The light shifted to a muted blue, and a faint vibration traveled up through his boots, rhythmic and alive. It wasn't imagination. The ground was humming, a pulse that felt like music without sound. He followed it. After some time, faint figures appeared in the distance. 2 Nari sentinels, their silhouettes tall and fluid beneath shimmering cloaks that refracted light. Malik stopped, raised his hands slowly. I'm not armed, he called out. His voice cracked. I'm looking for someone. Her name is Amiri. The sentinels exchanged a look. Then one spoke, his tone musical and cautious. You are human? Yes. Humans don't come here. I know. Malik swallowed. But I need to. They studied him for a long, tense moment before motioning him forward. Follow. Speak little. The Nari settlement wasn't a city. It was a living organism. Bioluminescent towers grew from the ground like coral, their walls shifting with gentle motion. The air smelled of minerals and rain. Everywhere Malik heard faint harmonics, the sound of breath and vibration woven together. A woman approached, her movements graceful yet deliberate. She wore markings of pale silver along her cheeks, Nari symbols Malik recognized from Zula's archives. Her gaze was calm but sharp. You crossed the border, she said. That is not done lightly. I'm here for Amiri, Malik replied. She is one of us, the woman interrupted, and you are not. Malik hesitated. She helped me see your world. Now I have to help her. The woman studied him. You carry the weight of loss. That gives you voice. Then softly she turned to the sentinels. Bring him. They led him through a passage that curved upward, opening into a chamber where light rippled like water. And there she was. Amiri stood near a pool of glowing liquid, her back turned, her skin faintly illuminated by the soft currents. When she looked up and saw him, surprise flashed across her features, followed by something deeper. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would." She stepped closer, eyes searching his face. "They said humans wouldn't survive the storms. I guess they were wrong." For a heartbeat, they just stood there, two survivors of different worlds, bound by what they'd lost. Then Amiri's expression changed. "They'll come for you," she said quietly. "Your kind doesn't forgive crossing lines. Then I'll stay on this side. It isn't safe here either." "Doesn't matter," he said. "I'm done being safe." Something in his voice made her stop arguing. She reached out and touched his wrist lightly, tracing the small burns left by the cuffs. "You still carry their marks." "Not for long," he murmured. And somewhere deep beneath the humming earth, something began to stir, a vibration of change neither of them could yet name. The silence in the Nari settlement felt deeper than the stillness outside. Malik stood in the glow of bioluminescent pools, the soft hum beneath his feet pulsing like a distant heartbeat. He could feel it in his bones, that unspoken tension, the kind that always followed a choice. Amiri stood beside him, her eyes locked on something only she could see. Her expression was unreadable, the silver markings on her face glowing faintly in the soft light. She hadn't spoken since they entered this chamber, as though waiting for him to understand something she hadn't said. Malik wanted to ask her about the storm, about the strange feeling in the air, but he didn't. Instead, he touched the small silver ring in his pocket, the data key Zula had given him. The weight of it, so light but with so much significance, felt heavier in his hand. "Will it work?" he asked, his voice low. Amiri turned her gaze to him, eyes clear, steady. "It will." Zula had insisted it was the key to reaching the hearts of the oppressed, the signal that would unite the scattered remnants of the resistance. It was an encrypted transmission, one designed to reach deep into human and Nari territories. If they could get it to the right ears, it would spark the flames of rebellion. Malik had no illusions about what it would cost them, but he couldn't turn back now. The broadcast would go out, he would make sure of it. "Will they listen?" he asked, his voice uncertain, even as he felt a fire beginning to burn within him. Amiri smiled faintly. "They will hear it, but listening and acting are different things. You will have to do more than just send a message." "What do you mean?" Malik frowned, his heart quickening. He hadn't thought this far ahead. "You've already begun," she said. "You've crossed the boundary. Now you must show them why it matters." She paused, her gaze far away. "The songs carry memories of what was, of what should have been. You will sing your name, Malik. You will give them your name, and then they will remember who they are." Malik looked at her, confused. "What are you asking me to do?" "You are not just carrying the Resistance's message. You are part of it." She stepped closer, her voice quiet but steady. "The broadcast will carry your voice, your identity. You must reclaim what they took from you, and then you must give it back." He felt a lump form in his throat, but there was no time to question. "And Zula?" Amiri's eyes softened. "Her voice will carry through you. She gave us the keys, and now you must turn the lock." Malik stood still, the weight of her words settling in his chest. There was no denying it now. This wasn't just about survival. It was about rewriting the future, one broadcast at a time. He had to do it for Zula, for every soul lost to the system, for every person who had been made to disappear without a name, without a voice. With a deep breath, Malik stood tall, feeling the first true pulse of purpose thrum through him. He didn't know if this would work, but he knew he couldn't stop. Amiri gave him a quiet nod. "It's time." They moved together toward the center of the chamber, where an array of consoles hummed with life. The network was ready. All he had to do was speak. Malik slid the ring into the console's port. The room seemed to hum louder, almost as if the system itself was awakening. The faint blue glow of the terminal flickered, then stabilized. The data key was uploading. The encrypted message would soon go live. He closed his eyes for a moment, his pulse quickening, his breath shallow. 1,000 voices, human, Nari, and every other soul crushed under the weight of the system, filled his mind. He exhaled slowly, and then Malik spoke. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice steady but growing in strength, "we are more than what they say we are. We are not their prisoners, not their slaves, not their tools. We are the ones they tried to erase, but they will never silence us. We will speak until the last chains fall. We will sing until the last silence breaks." As his words rang through the chamber, they resonated beyond, sent through the network to 1,000 unseen ears. The broadcast was live. The silence after Malik's broadcast felt like the world had exhaled, and for the first time he felt like he had truly been heard. The hum of the consoles around him faded into the background, a steady rhythm, but the weight of what he'd just done pressed down on him like an anchor. The room was still. No one moved. He glanced at Ameri, who stood beside him, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the terminal. Her expression was unreadable, but the quiet assurance in her posture told him more than words could. "Do you think they'll listen?" Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to the console and pressed a few keys, her fingers moving with practiced precision. When she turned back to him, her eyes were steady. "They have to listen. We've made sure of it." Malik's heart raced. "What happens now?" Amiri paused. "Now we wait." But it's never as simple as waiting. People will rise. Some of them will fight for what you've just given them. But there will be consequences. The weight of her words settled into his chest. He knew she was right. They hadn't just broadcast a message of hope. They'd thrown a stone into a lake, sending ripples through the entire system. Before he could say anything else, the console beeped, drawing their attention. A new message had been received. Ameri's fingers hovered over the keys, then she looked at Malik. "It's from the network." He swallowed, nodding. He had to know. The message came through, encrypted but decipherable to those who knew the key. A list of locations, coordinates. "And now we move," Amiri said. "We go to the places where the silence is loudest, where the people have forgotten their voices." Malik's thoughts raced. How do we reach them? By showing them they're not alone. Her voice softened, but her resolve remained unwavering. "You'll lead them. Your voice has broken the silence. Now we build the rest of the song." Malik nodded slowly. He felt it, something shifting inside him. He wasn't just the messenger anymore. He was the one shaping this. The people would follow not because they had to, but because they knew it was right. But just as he thought the moment was settling, the doors to the chamber slammed open. A group of armed Nari sentinels stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room like predators searching for prey. Malik's heart leapt into his throat. He moved instinctively toward Ameri, his body tense. The leader of the group stepped forward, a tall figure with dark, angular features. "You've broken the laws of the border," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of authority. "You've broadcasted a message without the council's approval. That cannot go unpunished." Malik opened his mouth, but Ameri was quicker. She stepped between them, her hands raised, calm but firm. "We did what had to be done. The people are already hearing the truth." The sentinel's gaze shifted between the two of them, calculating. For a moment, it felt like the entire room held its breath. "Truth?" the leader said, his voice colder now. "You have no idea what truth means. You have no idea what you've set into motion." Ameri didn't flinch. "Maybe you're right, but I'm not afraid of it." The sentinel's eyes darkened. He motioned for the others to move closer, and Malik felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The stakes had just risen, he could feel it. They were no longer dealing with an idea, they were dealing with their lives. "If you think we're just going to walk away from this, you're wrong," the leader continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "But know this, there's no going back now. You've given us no choice but to act." Malik's hands balled into fists. "I won't apologize for what we've done. You should be thanking us for giving you a reason to fight." Amiri looked at him, her eyes steady, her lips curving into a quiet smile. "You've already made your choice," she whispered. Now, we live with it. The sentinels stepped closer, but before they could take another step, the air in the room shifted. The sound of engines reverberated from outside, a low, distant thrum that grew louder. The sentinels paused, glancing at each other in confusion. Ameri turned back toward the console, her fingers flying over the keys once again. The world outside was shifting, and she was going to make sure it was too late for them to stop it. The sound of distant engines continued to reverberate through the chamber, growing louder until the walls themselves seemed to hum with anticipation. The sentinels, now momentarily distracted, exchanged uneasy glances, but the leader's eyes remained fixed on Ameri. There was a sharpness to his gaze, as if he knew something they didn't. Ameri's fingers hovered over the console's interface, her face calm but with a flicker of something more, something beyond the tension of the present moment. Her steady eyes met Malik's. "This isn't just about us anymore," she whispered, her voice low. "We've ignited a fire. Now we see who chooses to fight the flames." Malik's pulse quickened. "We're not backing down." "No," she agreed, her tone resolute. "Not anymore. We never will." The engines outside grew louder and the sentinels shifted again. The leader took a step forward, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What have you done?" Ameri's fingers moved with precision, her gaze locked on the screen. "What needed to be done? You wanted truth, so now you'll hear it." Malik didn't understand fully, but he felt the urgency in the air, the rising intensity as the outside noise intensified. He turned back to the sentinels. "We're not the only ones who've been waiting for this moment." The broadcast didn't just go to Nari settlements. It reached every colony, every sector. The sentinel leader's expression shifted, his lips tightening as though he understood what that meant. "You've put us all in danger. You're a fool to think the council won't respond." Ameri didn't flinch, her resolve unwavering. "Then we'll make sure they know who's been waiting." Before the leader could respond, the low rumble of the engines outside suddenly intensified into a sharp roar. The sentinels froze. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. Their next move, their fate. The world outside their sanctuary seemed to be racing toward them. Malik stepped closer to Ameri, his heart pounding in his chest. "What's happening?" She turned to him, her eyes locking with his. "Zula's legacy is more than just words. She left us a path, and you've just opened the door." She pressed a final key on the console, and the room flashed with light. The hum of the system surged around them as a new transmission line opened, encrypted, secure, and far-reaching. Malik took a breath, understanding now. The message wasn't just a call for rebellion, it was a call for unity, a signal not only to the oppressed, but to the revolutionaries scattered across the galaxy. The flames of defiance were spreading, and they were just the beginning. The sentinel leader's voice broke through the rising chaos, filled with both disbelief and rage. "You've brought the full wrath of the council down on us. You've sealed our fate." Ameri's smile was a mix of sadness and triumph, perhaps, but not without a fight. Suddenly, the outer doors of the chamber burst open, and Malik's eyes went wide as the heavy machinery of a fleet became visible through the open passageway. Ships, small but numerous, hovered just beyond the settlement's perimeter, cloaked in stealth and ready for a full assault. The resistance had come. Malik's heart raced, but there was no fear in him now. He turned to Ameri. "This is it, isn't it?" "This is everything," she replied quietly. "Now, we take the fight to them." The sentinels, now realizing the scope of what was happening, seemed frozen in place, unsure of their next move. But it was already too late for hesitation. The winds of change were already blowing too strong. "We are the storm now," Malik said, his voice filled with certainty. "There's no turning back." As the ships began to land, and the sound of engines grew deafening, the settlement's walls seemed to tremble with the force of what was coming. The resistance had arrived, not just to reclaim their land, but to reclaim their names, their truth. The sentinels, finally reacting, moved to raise their weapons, but they were too slow. Ameri stepped forward, her voice steady, cutting through the noise. "It's over." The first ship landed just outside the chamber, and Malik took a step forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ameri. The battle for their future had begun, and the fire they had ignited would not be easily extinguished. The world outside the settlement had exploded into chaos, but for a fleeting moment, time seemed to slow inside the chamber. The ships, now landing in quick succession, filled the sky with the sound of their engines, a deep, constant thrum that vibrated in Malik's chest. He could feel it reverberating through the ground beneath him, and for the first time in days, the pounding in his chest felt like the heartbeat of a collective force. Ameri stood beside him, her face lit by the flashing lights of the ship's thrusters. Her eyes were intense, focused, but there was something else there now, a glimmer of relief or maybe hope. In that brief pause, they weren't just two people caught in the momentum of change, they were the catalyst for it. "This is it," Malik said, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of what was to come. "We've crossed the line. There's no turning back now." Ameri nodded, her expression softening for the first time since they'd begun this journey. "There never was, Malik. Not for us." The doors to the chamber opened fully, and figures began to emerge from the ships, resistance fighters, Nari, and humans alike, all united in this single cause. Their faces were a mixture of determination and exhaustion, but there was no hesitation in their steps. Malik's heart swelled with pride. These were the people who had answered the call. He hadn't been sure at first, but now, standing among them, he understood. The message had been received. The resistance had finally found its voice. Ameri turned to him. "We've done what we could here. Now we go forward." Malik stepped forward with her, his mind racing with possibilities. The future had been uncertain for so long, too long. He'd spent his life in systems that crushed everything before it could take root. But now, standing in this room, filled with people ready to risk everything, he felt the weight of a future he could finally believe in. Outside, the battle was beginning. The ships had landed and the resistance was moving swiftly, organizing and preparing to confront the forces that had long kept them down. Malik could hear the murmurs of commands being given, the rustle of clothing and equipment, the charge of adrenaline in the air. He knew that no matter how this turned out, they had already won something that couldn't be taken away. They had stood up, together, and made their voices heard. Ameri met his gaze again, her expression serious, but not without a flicker of something deeper. "You know what this means, don't you?" she asked, her voice soft but certain. Malik's throat tightened, but he nodded. "I do. It means that we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for something more. For our stories, for our futures. We're fighting to be remembered." She smiled, her face lighting up with that soft glow Malik had come to recognize. "And that's the beginning of everything." Malik looked out over the gathering resistance fighters, their faces illuminated by the firelight of the first explosion far in the distance. He could hear the battle cries and feel the anticipation crackling in the air. But more than that, he felt something else, something real and undeniable, the beginning of change. The Nari sentinels who had stood so rigidly before now moved among them, speaking in soft, melodic tones, relaying the plans that had been formed. No one seemed like an outsider anymore. They were all part of this moment. A united front, human and Nari, bonded by their shared desire for something better. Malik took a deep breath, and for the first time, he felt something in his chest settle. "Let's make sure they remember who we are." Ameri's hand brushed his, a silent understanding passing between them. "We will." The battle had just begun, but for the first time in his life, Malik Kofi Dawes felt like he was fighting for something that could change everything, for him, for Ameri, and for every soul caught in the system. Together they were rewriting the story, one that would echo far beyond the reach of those who sought to silence them. And as he looked around, he saw the future in their eyes.